afternoon, and thank you for joining me on today's drive. Over the past few weeks I've been trying different formats of videos to see if people are interested in them or not, and ultimately the number of views, the number of likes will let me know whether or not you're interested in these videos. So this is another drive and talk video. So today's topic is I flip-flop between which topics, but today's topic is how good a driver are you? How good a driver do you really think you are? Now personally I think we're all pretty crappy drivers. We learn the rules, we get on the road, and then we basically don't learn anything. We're lucky to know if the rules have been updated. We all did the change from when you turned at the intersection and the car in front of you, you were turning left and the car in front of you coming across you was turning right. That was a change that was put upon us, and we all adapted to that change pretty well. There was some close misses a couple of times when people's habits overrode their knowledge of the law, but basically it's now changed. Nobody thinks twice about it. But other laws have changed. The single white line has become more like double white lines. And there's, I can't think off the top of my head, other laws have changed, but there's quite a few of them. And it really does make a difference that the laws change and you have to keep up with them. Driving styles change. Some people think they know the laws, but often they don't, because when we get trained the laws, almost everything, most of us are about 2/3 good at a particular activity. About 2/3. There's a small group that are in the 80% or above, but the majority of us are basically, for the rest of our lives, are C-grade students. So for example, let's take the example of a roundabout. So many times you'll approach a roundabout, you're first into the intersection of the roundabout, but there's a car on the right hooning down because he thinks he has right, because you have to give way to the right. But the roundabout doesn't work that way. The roundabout is whoever is first on the roundabout has right of way. So many times, if you try to enforce that, you will be in an accident. It's the dumbest rule. In England or the UK, they say the first on the right on the roundabout has right of way, but you have to actually give way to the cars approaching on the right, which I personally think is the way everybody generally operates, and I think that that's the way the law should be. And I've got videos up in Albury, and I'm astonished in New South Wales how long the cars will sit there on my left as I'm approaching a big roundabout. They will sit there with me 100 metres down the road and give way to me, whereas once they move onto the roundabout I have to give way to them. But they know the reality of it is that if they take off they risk having a crash. So why at the end of the day take that risk? So that's one example of a law that people don't understand. Zip mergers. How many times do you find a zip merge where two lanes are ending and they go into one but there's no dashed lines? That's called a zip merge. In the UK it's called a merge in turn. Now I really like the terminology in the UK. Now I'm Australian, but I've only done this because of my interest in the road laws and traffic lights and things like that. But they call it merge in turn, which implies a degree of politeness. You're giving way in turn. However, in Australia, how many times do you get to a zip merge and the car behind you decides to plant the foot and try to get past you? And the end result is, yep, they get past you, but you have to actually sometimes brake to let them get past because they're cutting you off. And it's very common. I've got cut off multiple times, and the worst case was a tradie who decided to plant the foot and go through. So you get used to that. If you see a ute coming by, you just expect a certain type of behaviour. Unfortunately, I try to judge people individually, but you start getting used to certain behaviours on the road. Another van zipped up past me. It's in one of my videos. On the left-hand side, it actually wasn't a zip merge, but the traffic was merging into one lane. There was nothing to say that it had the van had right of way, but they just forced their way through, cutting me off completely, potentially pushing me into the oncoming traffic. And that's the way we are. So they're bad drivers. I mean, drivers are about working with other people. If I raced up between these cars and cut them off, for example, this bus ahead is probably going to indicate and pull over, and so I could turn around and try to race through and get in front of that dark car and avoid being stuck behind the bus. But I know, since it's now gone past this one, the bus stop is indented further up, very few are. So basically, I try to remain calm and passive when I drive. I'm not an aggressive driver. Push me, I'll be aggressive, but you have to really, really, really push me hard. So, but you know them, you know the drivers that are on the road. They think it's all about them. They got right of way, they can do whatever they like, and they can push through. That consideration for other people. It's dog eat dog out there, so you've got to do what you've got to do to get to work or get to wherever you're going in the fastest possible time. That's just really one group of people, and I find though in our society the majority of people are very, very good. We're all very good. In fact, I think that as a society people are impressive. They literally are so impressive. You think about how these roads operate. Only about 2% of people are breaking the law. The majority of people are actually driving and not trying to break the law. So when you look at that, people are pretty good. Some people are actually too polite, and what they do is they break the law by giving way to somebody who doesn't have right of way. And what they've done in that case is they actually delay the traffic. They've made a decision to be a nice person and give way to that car exiting the shopping centre, but in turn they've blocked 3 or 4 cars behind them. And you often see it. That I've got another one down at Seaford where the car gave way to the person coming out of the shopping centre, blocked myself and the cars behind me, and then proceeded to the traffic lights and went through the traffic light as it was turning amber. And in actual fact it turned amber, so raced through the traffic lights, potentially breaking the law. So by being polite, all the other cars that could have got through at those traffic lights didn't. So you have to look at it. The laws are there for a reason, and if we obey the laws, we do lose sometimes that nice courtesy feeling. But you've got to look at it that when you don't obey the law and take it upon yourself to be courteous, are you impacting other people? And in some cases you are, and that's a bad driver. So now what I've done is I've got a running right now in the background. You'll hear it beep every now and again, or every time I go past a speed sign. It's in development mode. In normal mode it doesn't beep. It just lets you know that if you're speeding as you go past a speed sign for that section of road until it changes to the next speed sign. But one of the features I built into it, just for a bit of fun, because I was interested in this in myself, was a scoring capability. You could say it's a gamification of the app, because I think people have, if they're having fun, they'll use products. But what I did is it's decided to give people a score of 100 for a trip. And each time that they're actually going above the speed limit, they lose a point. A few times that's because the GPS isn't accurate, but most of the time, 99% of the time, it's because they're actually driving above the speed limit. So at the end of the trip, you can see how much you scored out of 100. And frankly, it's very difficult to score 100 out of 100. I will do this trip today. I don't know what I'm going to score. I'm better now that I've got this app. In all honesty, this has actually improved my driving because it's helped me to maintain my speed appropriately as I'm driving. For example, one of the most common things is as you come up to a slower speed zone, you're driving along and you see the speed zone, and as you hit the speed zone, you're starting to slow down. So let's say you're going along here and it's 70 kilometres an hour, and we hit the school zone and it's 40 kilometres an hour. Well, we start slowing down before we get to that. We might be down to about 50 by the time we get to the school zone. Then we hit the school zone and we continue to slow down. So when we're in the school zone, we're at 40 or thereabouts. But that's not the law. The law is when you reach that speed sign, you should be at that speed. So that's actually breaking the law. People don't realise they're doing that. Now, can they get fined for that? Extremely rare. Extremely rare because the general mobile phone or mobile speed cameras, generally the guidelines are not to be within 200 metres of a change of speed signs. So that's generally. But they are putting up cameras in school zones. New South Wales has multiple cameras at the actual school zones, not mobile, they're actually part of the school zone. So if you were to turn around and do that up in New South Wales, there's a very high probability you will get booked. Not so much in Melbourne, although they do have police sitting there monitoring traffic in a number of spots over in Lower Plenty Road. They've often got a speed camera over there. So the thing is, so if you don't ever test yourself to see how a good driver you are, and let's face it, we all think we're good drivers, and if you're driving with somebody else, you have confidence in that driver, and they may be a good driver, but there's things that you think that aren't quite how you would do it. And a typical example is when you come up to stop signs. When you're taught to drive, you're supposed to stop at the stop sign, but once you start driving, bad habits creep in and people roll through the stop sign. I've actually been told to keep going at a stop sign and not stop because they considered that I was going slow enough. That's stopping, but no, stopping is stopping. So that's a very common thing that people get wrong, and we do it out of habit more than anything else. We're checking the road and we just go to in very, very slow, a couple of kilometres per hour, see that the traffic's clear and then keep driving, but we're supposed to stop. So my web app that I'm using, speed limit alerts, won't catch you people are doing that. So you'll still do that and you won't lose any points for doing it. So it's good to actually test yourself, and I'd highly recommend grab the speed limit alerts. If you're in Victoria, this works. It doesn't work in other states. So grab the speed limit alerts, set it on auto and click start, and off you go. And at the end of the trip, see how you scored. And I think you'll be quite surprised. I've had other people who've tried this and they're down in the low 80s by the end of the drive. Because, for example, going along this road, you turn on it, it's 50 kilometres an hour, you're not thinking about it, you've just come off a 60 kilometre an hour road and you might go up. Or a lot of suburban areas now are just 40 kilometres an hour in the back streets, and it's so easy to go over those speeds. So give it a go, test out, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I say pleasant because you'll be surprised at just how many times you actually break the speed limit, and you're not even aware of it. And this way, it actually logs those times and counts them, and so you can see just how many times you've broken the speed limit as you've driven along. I think it's great, and I use it. I use this app to let me know when I'm speeding. If I go 2 kilometres an hour above the speed limit, then it will tell me to slow down in my voice, and I like that. I like nagging myself, weirdly enough, and I do slow down straight away. And if I've done that, it's because I'm not aware I'm doing it. Now, the reason for 2 kilometres per hour is that I found at 1 kilometre an hour, the variation was just nagging too much. And I looked at the European standard. It's they're bringing in, and I've read somewhere that it's 3%. I've read other places it was 1.6 miles per hour. And I thought to myself, I'd like to have something like that standard. 1.6 miles per hour it is about 2 kilometres an hour. 3% of at 60 kilometres an hour is about 2 kilometres. Then I actually went backwards from it. The laws, Victorian road laws, basically stipulates that speed camera detection equipment for fixed cameras or mobile cameras is, one of them's fixed, I can't remember which one's which, but one is 3% and one is 2%. And so for example, police using a handheld radar is 2%. So 2% of 60 kilometres an hour would be basically, I think that's 1.2 kilometres an hour. Now, so perhaps a little bit low, because, or is that 2 kilometres an hour? No, actually it's 2 kilometres an hour and 3 kilometres an hour, not percentage. Once it's over 100 kilometres an hour, it's actually a percentage. So 2 kilometres an hour is the allowance you're given, because that's to allow them to calibrate their equipment. Their equipment doesn't have to be accurate, and it can be out by up to 2 kilometres an hour. Now you've got to also realise your equipment isn't accurate, so the GPS isn't accurate, so you could exceed the speed limit. But generally speaking, the GPS is pretty good as you're going along, fairly steady, and so if setting it at 2 kilometres an hour above the speed limit means that you'll get warned and you'll bring it back. I also believe, except for, in fact I even think that the police will do it as well, fixed speed cameras, I don't think that they will give you much tolerance. I don't know. Mobile speed cameras, which there's far more of them, because the fixed ones I get alerted to by the web app I've created, but the mobile speed cameras, they reportedly set the speed higher. And it makes sense, because if you're doing 60, you're not breaking the law if you're doing actually 60. If you're doing 62, well, their equipment has got to allow you that 2 kilometres per hour. So if you're doing 63 and you got booked for doing 1 kilometre an hour over the speed limit, that isn't very good for public relations. 2 kilometres an hour, still pushing it. So I think that at 3 kilometres an hour would be where the figure would probably start kick in. start to kick in. This is just a guess, an educated guess. And so you'll find that you can probably go up to about 65 kilometres an hour, 2 plus another 3, and then you generally won't get booked. And to back that, the South Australia, you look at their fines, I don't think there's a single figure under 68 kilometres per hour. So you have to actually be speeding quite a bit. I think New South Wales, they almost brag that they're tighter, and so I wouldn't suggest 6 kilometres an hour, because for the reasons that I said, it's not only about finding people, it's about looking to be fair, just saving face for the government. So 2 kilometres an hour, okay, because that's what their equipment legally has to allow. So they can't book you for that. Another 2 is pushing it, getting fined at 2 kilometres an hour. It looks pretty petty, and that doesn't go down well for the general public. So 3 is still looking petty, but they could get away with it, and 4, well, you're definitely over. So I would say that they're the sort of figures. So, but for me, the 2 kilometres per hour is because that's the allowance that they give their equipment, and it stops the nagging occurring when you're just jumping up and down a little bit, and it's working pretty well. I rarely go over that speed, and when I do, it will tell me. It will usually be some unusual situation, a downhill slope, the traffic is slowing and I'm not quite paying attention, going from one speed zone to another. They're the things that actually you can catch me out as well. So yeah, so try out, see how good a driver you are. Try out the scoring capability in my web app, speed limit alerts, and give it a go. I think, and if you start using it on a regular basis, you'll actually find you create better driving habits. In fact, I actually drive faster because I have a tool that allows me to see my speed. It goes green within 5 kilometres of the speed limit, so I can see at a glance, without even knowing what the speed is, that I'm actually close to the speed limit. Whereas before, I drift up and down. Yep, I can look at the speedo, that's not a problem, but the speedo doesn't tell me what the speed limit is. So I'm actually finding I get to places faster because I've got a more accurate tool that assists me on a day-to-day basis. So thank you once again for joining me on. You certainly helped make the time pass by, and hopefully you've gained something out of this drive and talk session today. Thank you very much. I do appreciate you watching this video. So please subscribe, hit that like button, and we'll see you in the next video.